Welcome to the fifth of video tutorial series how to use entity framework code first. This is Nagesh here. In part 4th of this video tutorial series we have seen how to use data annotation in entity framework code first. So basically data annotations are used to validate the user input. In this part 5th we are going to see what is code first database initializers, why entity framework code first migrations, and step-by-step code first migration in entity framework. So in part 4th of this video tutorial series we have done these things. That is, in case of our application in our domain model classes we are having the two classes, that is one is the category and one is the product. In case of the product class we have added some data annotations, and that is we have applied the data annotation attributes, that is display, required, and string length. And to one more domain model class, that is a category, in the same category domain model class we have applied the data annotation, something called as a required. So now when we try to run this particular application in the browser, so at that time it is throwing some exception. So what is that exception? Let's see. So because in this case we have changed the model classes, that is we have applied the data annotation to our domain model classes, so that's the reason it is throwing some exception. So to overcome with this exception, code first entity framework code first approach has given us the code first migrations to work with that particular exceptions. Meaning of this one is that, suppose that means when we implement the code first migration, that allow us to create a new database or update the existing database based on our model classes by using the package manager console. That particular package manager console exists within the Visual Studio 2013 or Visual Studio 2012. Now see, it is showing the exception, that is invalid operation exception was unhandled by the user code. That means here we have changed our domain model classes and our database is already created in that case. Now we need to create a database once again. So to deal with this particular exception we have given something called as an entity framework code first migrations. So first we are going to see what is code first database initializers. In that case, these code first database initializer provided by the entity framework when we work with the entity framework code first approach. And to work with the code first database initializers, we have three options for initializing database. As that is, first approach is create database if not exist. First thing is that create database if not exist. That means we need to create database if that particular database is not exist. This is the default database initializers class used by the code first, and this particular class creates a database only if it doesn't exist. That means, as its name suggests, create database if not exist. This database initializer will create a database only if it doesn't exist. That means this particular initializer help you to avoid any accidental deletion of the database. One more code first database initializer is there, that is drop create database when model changes. That means you can drop and create the database when your model changes. So this one is drop create database when model changes. So this database initializer class drop the existing database and recreate it if there is a mismatch between the model classes and table schema. That means it create a database once again if you change some properties within the model classes, and this particular initializer is useful during starting phase of the development and testing when models are changing often. There is no concern about the existing database record. In this case, we are not considering the existing database records because we are using this particular database initializer in development and testing phase when our model frequently changes. And one more database initializer is there, that is drop create database always. Third one is there, that is this one, drop create database always. Basically the use of this database initializer class is that it always drops and creates a new database whether it is already present or not with every run of the application. That means it will always drop and create database for every run of the application. If database is present, it will drop the database and create new database for you. Even if it is not exist, it will create a new database for you. And basically this initializer is useful during the testing when you want to run the application within the fresh set of data. That means the reason behind using this particular drop create database always initializer is that because in the testing phase we want fresh set of data every times. Now this is the three database initializers. Now see why code first migrations, why there is requirement of the code first migration. The reason behind is that the above the three given, that is create database if not exist, drop create database when model changes, and drop create database always. These three database initializer approach become fail when you add a new model class within our model folder of our application, and we want to update the existing database without any deletion or change. Meaning of this one is that suppose in our case we are having only two model classes, that is category and product. Now see, when I add one more model domain model class over here, something called as a supplier, then our requirement is that we need to create a database table for that particular supplier, and we want to keep the already created tables and data within that tables as it is. And in that case this particular database initializer approach fail. To achieve this we need to use the entity framework code first migration, and this particular migration allow you to update existing database with the new model class changes, and your existing database remains same with your database record. That means when we use the code first migration, in our case we have added some class called as a supplier, so it will keep already database with the records as it is, and it will add a new table called as a supplier within our database. Now see, if I want to work with the code first migration, first we need to do one thing, that is we need to enable the migrations. Now see, in our model class I'm going to add one class called as a supplier. Right click on the model, add class supplier. Add new model class supplier with the two properties, supplier ID and supplier name. Supplier.cs, and add two properties. Here you can add two properties, that is supplier name prop integer ID, and one more thing I want to take a property as a supplier name. String, I am specifying it as a S name, so that is the supplier name. So this is the model class that we have added in our model. Getting it? Now see, in case of our database, here we are having one table, we are having database, that is product database. In this product database, currently we are having the we are having another database, that is, now see, we are having another database, that is product DB. To check this one, you can see the web configuration file in our solution explorer, where we have specified the name of the database, that is a product DB. So in our database it is a product DB. In that product DB we are having the two tables, one is the category, another one is the product. Now our requirement is that we have added one model in our model folder, that is the supplier. So when we run the application, it should create a table named as supplier. So for that reason, first thing we need to do over here, that is, we need to enable the migration. So just see, to enable a migration, go to the package manager console. From tools, you can navigate to the NuGet package manager, and from here you can open the package manager console. And from here we need to use a PowerShell command, something called as a enable migrations, something called as a, here we need to use a PowerShell command, something called as a enable migrations. Enable migrations. So for that, see here I need to use a command, something called as a enable migrations. Now in this case you can observe the solution explorer. In this solution, once we fire this particular command, enable hyphen migrations, by default in our solution explorer one folder get created. Now see, enable migrations, one folder get created over there with the name migrations. Now you can see the solution explorer. Once it is done, it will add one folder called as a migrations in our solution explorer. Now see, it added the folder that is a migration in our solution explorer. Now we want to add that particular model in our database. That means we need to add a migration. Now see, it by default it is added one particular migration, that is initial create.cs. So open this one, it is added the categories and products in our initial migration. That means it has created the two databases. Now see, we need to add one more migration for the supplier. That is, to add a migration you need to use a PowerShell command, that is add hyphen migration space migration name. Suppose I am saying supplier model as my migration name, and you press enter. Because we have changed the model, we have added new model in our model folder. So now in this case you can see it has added one more model over there. In case of migration it has added one more class over there with some ID underscore supplier model.cs, this particular class. So this is how we can add the migration. Now see, I need to update these particular changes in my database. To update the changes, I need to use PowerShell command something called as a update database. So I need to use a PowerShell command something called as a update database. Update hyphen database. Press enter. So it will add supplier model in our database. Now see, this is our database with already database created with the categories and product as a table. Just refresh this particular database and view the table. So now see here, it has not created the supplier table. The reason behind is that we need to add a one DB set in case of our context class. For that, in our model in code first context, we need to add one DB set. Copy this one. We need to add a, that is in category, instead of category we need to add a supplier suppliers get set. Save this one, then again fire a command update database. Again fire a command update database. So now see here, when you refresh this product DB, this is our database, and see the result. Now see here, it is not added the any table over here. So now see, in case of our migration, we can update the migration once again with the help of, that means we can update the database, update hyphen database once again. Enter. Now see the database. In case of our database is the product DB. Tables. So even though it is not adding the any one more table, that is supplier over there, for that reason what we can do, we can add migration, we can delete the initial migration that we have created, and we can add that particular migration once again. That means to here we can add migration once again, add hyphen migration name, that is supplier model, add migration supplier model. So it will add the migration with the name supplier model, and now we need to update the database. So update hyphen database. So now see the database. In our case, this is the product DB. Just refresh this one, tables. Just a minute. Now just refresh this particular database and see the in case our database is product DB. In this product DB table, in this table you will see here one table with the suppliers is get created with the two fields, ID and supplier name, that is S name. And in case of the migration history, once you open it, in that case you can see here a migration ID with the supplier model gets added to this particular table in the migration history. So this is how we can work with the code first migration in case of the entity framework code first. So that's it. Thank you for watching this particular video.